taking a backseat to the toilet seat. If the RNC has its way, the Pennsylvania primary will be a nearly complete waste of time. And Feminist Camille Paglia wants to know, what is it with the Hillary cult? My name is Howard Riell, and this is Real Truth. You're listening to the American Freedom Network, streaming live around the world at AmericaNewsNet.com and on Facebook and YouTube and Tumblr, and in the book Real Truth, Stay Angry. Of course, as always, broadcasting out across the Colorado Front Range on KHNC, Johnstown, Colorado, 1360 AM The Lion. Our call-in number is 877-254-7524. My friends, it's Thursday. Let's hit it. Item from CBS News. ESPN has benched Curt Schilling permanently. The sports network fired the former world champion pitcher following his anti-transgender post on Facebook. ESPN is an inclusive company. Curt Schilling has been advised his conduct was unacceptable and his employment with ESPN has been terminated, the network said in a statement. Schilling shared a post on Monday showing a man in a wig wearing a tight shirt, stockings with the caption, "Let him in to the restroom with your daughter or else you're a narrow-minded, judgmental, unloving, racist bigot who needs to die," unquote. The question is toilet seats. The question is a back seat. Free speech has now taken a back seat to toilet seats. We've got transgender people desperately in need of emotional, psychological care who have mutilated their bodies, and America is accommodating them instead of helping them. Well, that's bad enough. But when someone says the king has no clothes, we should respect hearing the truth. And Curt Schilling has a right to free speech. Just because he's on TV doesn't mean that that right has been taken away from him. ESPN is pandering to, well, anybody who thinks that cutting off your what's-this is a good thing. Anyone who thinks men should be able to use the ladies' room, ESPN wants you to know they are with them. My friends, in the interest of full disclosure, I don't work for ESPN. I don't play political correct games. The show's called Real Truth for a reason, because that's what you get, the real truth. The real truth is that Curt Schilling has lost his job for exercising his free speech right. ESPN should be ashamed of itself. And by the way, I never watch ESPN, but if you do, I'd stop. Item from the Associated Press, Dateline, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, long an afterthought in presidential primary stakes, may emerge as a key player in crowning this year's Republican presidential nominee. Pennsylvania will send a whopping number of delegates to July's unsettled Republican National Convention who, under a state party rule, can vote for whichever candidate they choose. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. The delegates coming from Pennsylvania can vote for whomever they choose. Okay. Now you have to explain to me why there's an election. Why we're selecting delegates. If I pick this delegate and say, I want you to go to Cleveland and vote for Donald Trump, and he says okay, and then I walk out of the room and he says, I'm not voting for Trump, I'm voting for Cruz, exactly what have I accomplished through my vote? This is amazing. Almost as amazing as men being given a green light to use ladies' rooms. What the hell has happened? What has happened to America? What's happened to common sense? I just don't get it, my friends. I really don't. If you do get it, please call me and tell me, because I'd like to get it too. 877-254-7524. I just don't get it. Let's continue. As a result, Pennsylvania's April 26th statewide primary election is relatively meaningless, a beauty pageant. What is meaningful, however, is whom the primary voters will select to send to Cleveland as the 54 uncommitted delegates. And then the drama begins, said Michael McMonagle, a delegate candidate from Montgomery County who supports Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Polls show New York businessman Donald Trump leading both Cruz and Ohio Governor John Kasich in Pennsylvania, where primary contests are usually so late that the eventual presidential nominee is no longer in doubt. Unquote. Well, my friends, the same treatment that voters in the great state of Colorado and in Louisiana, Wyoming, and elsewhere have gotten, the Republican National Committee saying, you know what, screw you. You don't decide who runs this country, we do. Well, my friends, I don't know what to tell you. I asked you before what's happened to America, and the question covers this too. I was brought up to believe that whoever got the most votes was elected. If that's not right, then it clearly needs to be fixed. And if you're going to be someone like Reince Priebus or any of the talking heads on the cable networks and say, well, what can I say? Those are the rules. Well, I'm going to tell you you're a schmuck. I'm going to tell you you don't know how America operates. I'm going to tell you you don't have any respect for the American people. The people must have a voice in elections. Is this really a revelation? How can these states simply take the vote away from its citizens? How can citizens allow their states to take their votes away? I haven't heard of anybody suing any of these RNC outfits in various states, but you know what? I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me they just might possibly have something there. At least some kind of injunction to stop this theft from happening. The main thing in America today for the machine, for the establishment, is stopping Donald Trump because Donald Trump will work for us, for our benefit. Well, the machine doesn't want that. They want someone to work for their benefit, even if it's Hillary Clinton. The RNC would sooner have Hillary Clinton because she's owned. She's a political whore. Than someone like Donald Trump, who's not owned by anybody. It's disgusting. It's disgraceful. It's un-American. And guys, this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where we have to stand up. We have to take a stand. We got to get loud. We got to get active. We got to get angry. And we got to say no. You will not steal American democracy. It's Thursday. It's Real Truth. I'll be right back.
Howdy folks, have you ever thought about having your own backyard chicken? Now you have a source for certified organic, no GMO, no soy chicken feed. HappyHens.biz can even deliver, or you can pick up. Call me, Tim, at 303-829-5948, or go to happyhens.biz for pricing and ingredients. At happyhens.biz, we love happyhens.biz, or call us at 303-829-5948. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tom Phillips, founder of the Green Earth. How many times have you gone into a health food store and are confused as to the many different brands and prices on the same herbal supplements? You want to buy the cheapest, but you're afraid the quality is less, so you buy the most expensive. Truth is, the cheapest may be better. Green Earth herbal supplements are all manufactured in our Wheat Ridge, Colorado plant at 4565 Kipling Street using the highest quality herbs that we source from all over the world. Our 150 different herbal supplements are the most potent and safest in America. Our guarantee is your money back, no time limit. Just return the bottle empty or full, no questions asked. So when you come to our new location, look for our new name, New Genesis Health, or call us at 888-765-HERB. That's 888-765-4372.
The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He makes the plans of the people of no effect. The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people he has chosen as his own inheritance. Psalm 33, verses 10 through 12.
All right, guys, I'm back. My name is Howard Riell. The show is called Real Truth. I know that because I named it myself. Another guy who has a talk show is Michael Savage. Now, I've been telling you that Ted Cruz is a Trojan horse candidate. He is the establishment. He and his wife Heidi came up through the Bush crime family. Heidi is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Heidi is a managing director at Goldman Sachs. It doesn't get very much more establishment than that. Here's Michael Savage talking about Ted Cruz and who he really is. Give a listen.
We're going to talk about Ted Cruz. It came out today, and I'm sorry to tell all of you people who love this show and still love Ted Cruz, the real Ted Cruz is supported by the Bush family. Did you know any of this? Did you know that Neil Bush, the son of President H.W. Bush, who defrauded U.S. taxpayers out of $1.5 billion in the SNL scam, and later lobbied for the Chinese government, has formally endorsed Senator Ted Cruz for president? This is a real one. And we'll talk about Silverado Savings and Loan in Denver, Colorado. Neil Bush, the no-good son, is endorsing Ted Cruz. Now, what does that matter? Anyone can endorse anybody. Well, there's much more to it than that. The connections between Ted Cruz and the Bush family are very deep. I'm sorry to tell you. This was pointed out in an article today by Roger Stone in the Daily Caller. The Bush-Cruz connection is clear. Ted Cruz was George W.'s brain when he ran for president. Did you know that? Did you know that Ted Cruz was George W.'s brain when he ran for president? How could you not know this? How could you buy this cover story about Constitution? Constitution. Ted Cruz wrote the Constitution. He's the only one who knows what it is. Ted was a top policy advisor for George W. Bush. He was trying to get a job as Solicitor General, but settled for a job in the Federal Trade Commission. Ted Cruz is a Bushman with deep ties to the political and financial establishment. Ted and his wife Heidi brag about being the first Bush marriage. You see, they met as Bush staffers. Did you know that? Mr. Independent, Mr. Constitution. Did you know they met while working for George Bush? You don't know any of this. You don't know how many people who support him worked in the government and now claim they're anti-government. How could you people be so gullible? Cruz was an advisor on legal affairs while his wife Heidi was an advisor on economic policy, and then became director for the Western Hemisphere on the National Security Council under none other than Condoleezza Rice-Aroni. Condoleezza Rice-Aroni helped give us the phony war in Iraq. Heidi Cruz then went to the Bush U.S. Trade Representative. Are you ready for this one? Heidi Cruz became a top deputy to U.S. Trade Rep Robert Zoellick, who used Heidi's membership in the CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, and her job at GS Goldman Sachs. And the bailed-out bank then loaned Cruz $1 million secretly to finance a Senate race. Ted Cruz then borrowed an undisclosed $1 million loan from Citicorp. The fact of the matter is, Cruz is not who he appears to be. He is not an outsider. He is an insider. He is a Bush insider. He is the ultimate insider. He's a former top Bush 41 policy aide and globalist. He is an Ivy Leaguer. He's an establishment insider. I can give you more, and I will, because he is a puppet of the Republican establishment itself. That is why he is attacking Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is attached to no one. In plain English. Did you understand what I said to you? So we've got two main topics here.
Donald does well with voters who have relatively low information, who are not that engaged, and who are angry, and they see him as an angry voice.
Oh, you're full of it, you fool.
Where we're beating him is when voters get more engaged and they get more informed. When they inform themselves, they realize his record. He's what they're angry at. He is the corruption, and if you want someone to stand up to Washington, the only one who had doing so in this race is me.
Ted Cruz is a phony through and through. I'm not going to sit on the fence about him anymore. I would not support him. And I'll tell you something else. I'll say it to you right now. If Ted Cruz wins, I'm not voting for him. He is a stealth Democrat. He's part of the establishment. He is part of the government itself. He's tied right into everything he claims he opposes. He's a member of the Bush clan. Read about it. What? I'm not making this up. What do you want me to do, make up stories for you about how wonderful he is and he's a true constitutionalist? None of it is true. He is a member of the Bush cabal, period. So if you want Bush again, vote for Ted Cruz. If you want open borders, vote for Ted Cruz. If you want the country to cave in altogether, vote for Ted Cruz, because you're not going to get any of what he promises you, because he's owned by the RNC. In fact, in my opinion, he's working with the RNC to destroy Donald Trump. And now he's saying, I love this one, he's so intelligent, he's such an intellectual giant, Ted Cruz. Dracula is so intelligent, he says Donald Trump voters have low information and are not that engaged. Ted, I would challenge you to an intellectual debate on any subject if you're choosing at any time. And we'll see who has low information on a variety of subjects. And no one is as engaged as I am, Ted. And I don't support you, I support Trump. He says that he does well with voters who have low information, who are not engaged. He puts people down as dumb. This is classic elitism. This is Harvard speaking. This very same elite nonsense that we're trying to get rid of in Washington is Ted Cruz. He is Washington. How could you say he's an outsider when he's a U.S. Senator? How could you call him an outsider? I don't understand this. WMAL, Bob, where do you stand on Ted Cruz after these disclosures about him?
Dr. Savage, you nailed this thing 6 months ago. I kept an open mind about it, and as things have worn on, I've seen Trump, and you nailed this. I got to thank you for keeping me informed.
Well, okay, hold on. When you say I nailed the Cruz thing, what do you mean? With him putting everyone down that we're all stupid?
No, that he was a wolf in sheep's clothing. He was a typical Washington D.C. guy.
Oh, you mean all the connections to the Bush family going all the way back, and Ted and his wife Heidi? She's a member of the Bush staffers when they met. What more do we need to know?
I mean, how much more insider do you need to be? Because the one thing about Trump, Mr. Savage, I got to say, he's forcing them to expose themselves. And today, I'm of that certain demographic that Mr. Cruz spoke of today, the highly, stupid. But,
yeah, in other words, you're one of the dumb people who don't know any better. I get it.
Oh, yeah, that's me.
I'll bet you're a Christian. I have a feeling you're one of those knuckle-dragging Christians.
Well, I fear God, yes, sir.
You see, there you are. That's who Cruz is talking about. Dumb people that he exploits himself waving the Bible around.
I heard you say about Bush. I heard about that the other day when you spoke of that. And, there is no more insider than a Bush. There's nothing more insider than that. I work here in this town in D.C., and this place is the craziest, most liberal place you've ever seen in your life.
Cruz was an advisor on legal affairs for Bush. His wife Heidi was an advisor on economic policy for Bush. She worked on the National Security Council under Condoleezza Rice under Bush. She gave us the phony war in Iraq, Condoleezza Rice. Heidi Cruz then went to the U.S. Trade Representative Department to work for Representative Robert Zoellick, a deep member of the Council on Foreign Relations and a job at Goldman Sachs. Why do people think Ted Cruz is an outsider? I don't know. Who are they being hoodwinked by? And by the way, now ask yourself who the biggest supporters of Cruz are. What's in it for them is the question. What will they get out of a Cruz presidency is what you must ask. Quid pro quo is how it goes. This is the Savage Nation. Be here. Panic in Needle Park. 855-407-282, WDRC in Connecticut. Veronica, go ahead. What's on your mind? Make it quick.
Well, apparently I'm such a low information voter, according to the devil in sheep's clothing, that I have never, ever bought Ted's hypocrisy. Look, anybody can stand up and hold a Bible. That doesn't mean diddly. And the Bible even will say to you, someone who does that, it by your actions.
You mean Ted Cruz waving the Bible around? All you needed was some snakes and some strychnine like Jimmy Carter when he went into the South.
Exactly, but you know what he gives? Anyone who does know the Bible knows you tithe 10%. That's coming right out of the Bible. But Mr. Cruz seems to only give 1% maybe?
I don't know what he gives, and I could care less what he gives. I know his ties to the Bush family are so deep that he is a Bush. That's all that matters. It came out today, his deep ties, his wife's deep ties, they're part of the Bush clan. They're part of the Bush establishment. I was not a supporter of Bush, but many in talk radio were. That's why they support Cruz, because he's no different than Bush.
You're absolutely right, and thank God.
I wasn't invited to the Bush White House. They were. I wasn't invited to tea with George Bush. They were. I've been an independent from the beginning. They weren't. And Cruz, something about Cruz threw me off from the beginning. I didn't like his look. I thought he was a sneak. Man to man, I looked at him. Mano a mano, he was a sneak. There's a sneakiness about him. He looked like a Dracula figure to me. Always a shadiness about him. Now, all of a sudden, it comes out he's deeply tied to the entire Bush clan. So people say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, the answer is, if you like the Bush establishment, then go vote for Cruz. If you want a Bush 4, go ahead, vote for him. Or whatever it is, Bush 4 or 5. I don't like reruns, you know? It's like Runaway Train 1, Runaway Train 2 was enough for me. I don't need Runaway Train 3 with Ted Cruz. Thank you, Veronica. Time is...
All right, guys, there you have it. There you have it. Cruz is as inside as it gets. And so in a year in which voters are speaking quite loudly, saying we don't want the establishment, we want an outsider, well, Cruz is the establishment. Cruz is the establishment. Cruz is more of the same. Cruz is another Bush presidency. And so the last thing we want, certainly the last thing we need as a nation, is Ted Cruz as president. Item from the Economic Collapse blog. If you had to make a sudden visit to the emergency room, would you have enough money to pay for it without selling something or borrowing the funds from somewhere? Most Americans may not realize this, but this is something the Federal Reserve has actually been tracking for several years now. According to the Fed, an astounding 47% of all Americans could not come up with $400 to pay for an emergency room visit without borrowing it or selling something. Various surveys I've talked about in the past have found that more than 60% of all Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, but I didn't realize things were quite this bad for about half the country. If you can't even come up with $400 for an unexpected emergency room visit, then you're just surviving from month to month by the skin of your teeth. Unfortunately, about half of us are currently in that situation. Unquote. My friends, that's because of the Democrats. It's because of Barack Obama. It's because of his Secretary of State and the wife of a previous Democratic president, Bill Clinton. It's about Hillary Clinton. It's about Democratic Party. It's about socialism. It's about everything on the left, which is anathema and poison to the American way of life. Speaking of which, item from Salon.com from Camille Paglia, I quote, "What is it with the Hillary cult? As a lifelong Democrat who will be enthusiastically voting for Bernie Sanders in next week's Pennsylvania primary, I have trouble understanding the fuzzy, rosy filter through which Hillary fans see their champion. So much must be overlooked or discounted, from Hillary's compulsive money lust and her brazen indifference to normal rules, to her conspiratorial use of shadowy surrogates and her sociopathic shapeshifting in policy positions for momentary expedience. Hillary's breathtaking lack of concrete achievements or even minimal initiatives over her long public career doesn't faze her admirers a whit. They have a religious conviction of her essential goodness and blame her blank track record on diabolical, sexist obstructionists. When at last week's debate, Hillary crassly blamed President Obama for the disastrous Libyan incursion that she had pushed him into, her acolytes hardly noticed. They don't give a damn about international affairs. All that matters is transgender bathrooms and instant access to abortion. I'm starting to wonder, given the increasing dysfunction of our democratic institutions, if Hillary's cult isn't perhaps registering an atavistic longing for monarchy. Or perhaps it's just a neo-pagan reversion to idolatry and can be felt in the Little Italy Street Festival scene from The Godfather Part 2, where devout pedestrians pin money to the statue of San Rocco as it's carried by in procession. There was a strange analogy to that last week when Sanders supporters satirically showered Hillary's motorcade with dollar bills as she arrived at George Clooney's luxury fundraiser in Los Angeles. We'll take a break, my friends. Real Truth will return.
Howdy, folks. Have you ever thought about having your own backyard chicken? Now you have a source for certified organic, no GMO, no soy chicken feed. HappyHens.biz can even deliver, or you can pick up. Call me, Tim, at 303-829-5948, or go to happyhens.biz for pricing and ingredients. At happyhens.biz, we love happyhens.biz, or call us at 303-829-5948.
Great Plains Power has been viable electric power systems in the Rocky Mountain area since 1992. Our systems rely on the sun to help make you self-reliant for your power needs. Solar energy can be scaled to fit any situation, from complete power independence to backup power for the short term. Our expertise focuses on standalone power, but we have extensive experience with utility interactive systems as well. Custom-tailored capabilities as modest emergency lighting all the way to commercial-scale power. Great Plains Power is a full-service company. We service everything we sell. We provide and design turnkey packages, custom design system, and parts for do-it-yourself. With more than 20 years of specialized experience at your disposal, let us know what your power concerns or goals are. Reach us by phone or the internet. Call 303-239-9963. That's 303-239-9963. Or go to GreatPlainsSolar.com. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness of him and cried out, saying, This was he of whom I said, He who comes after me is preferred before me, for he was before me. The Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 14 and 15. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. This is the America News Network.
The uniform people in Greeley ask everyone to get involved in our community this holiday season. Whether it's a toy for a needy child, care package for military members, or giving the gift of life by giving blood, you can make a difference and directly affect someone else's life. This message is from Centus, the uniform people in Greeley. Call 352-2233. They're on the air because they care. Named one of the most admired outsourcing companies in America. Centus.
My friends, I wonder if Ted Cruz's ears are ringing. Because today seems to be Ted and Heidi Cruz Day here on Real Truth. Here's a guy named Rick Wells on video. You'll find this, like the previous video, on my Facebook page, Real Truth Radio, R-I-E-L-L. Here's Rick Wells talking about Ted and Heidi Cruz and their one world government connection. Here we go.
If you love America as much as you say, then you'll listen very closely. So Ted Cruz stands up and says it's time to step up and restore the American promise. But what promise is he speaking of? The promise his wife broke when she sold America out to the Council on Foreign Relations? The promise that she broke when she began work on building a North American community? What the heck is that, you ask? Well, yes, it does sound so innocent. We're just building a community for North America. Surely you can't be against building a community, right? Well, yes, Mrs. Ted Cruz, I am. So how do you dissolve a nation's sovereignty peacefully and with the people's consent? Well, you can just ask Mrs. Cruz, or anyone living in Europe for that matter. They all now use one currency. You see, the transformation of Europe into a single national body with its own bank, legislative body, and military force took many, many years to accomplish, about 42 to be exact. It began with the Treaty of Paris in 1951, and that created the European Coal and Steel Community. And then when the 1957 Treaty of Rome was signed, it morphed into the European Economic Community. In 1993, by order of the Maastricht Treaty, it was renamed the European Community and then absorbed by the newly formed European Union. So why is this important to Americans? Why should you care? Well, one only needs to work the clock backwards from Heidi Cruz's work to build a North American community to see what the globalists have in store for this hemisphere. What follows is only a portion of the exhaustive timeline that's posted at globalresearch.ca.
Now, I'm the first to acknowledge that there's a good deal left unfinished on the conservative agenda. Our cleanup crew will need more than 2 years to deal with the mess left by others for over half a century.
Now, it all began with Ronald Reagan, Republican, in 1979. He was campaigning, and while he was campaigning, he proposed the North American Agreement to produce, quote, a North American continent in which the goods and people of the three countries will cross boundaries more freely. He fulfilled that campaign promise in 1981 when he presented the idea of a North American common market. Then, 4 years later, in 1985, he notified Congress of his desire to begin negotiations with Canada on a free trade agreement to promote trade. He gives then Congress 90 days to approve it. 2 years later, in October of 1987, the Canada-United States Free Trade Agreement is finalized. U.S. Trade Representative Clayton Uter said of the agreement, quote, we've signed a stunning new trade pact with Canada. The Canadians don't understand what they've signed. In 20 years, they will be sucked into the U.S. economy. With Reagan sealing up Canada in 1990, the new president, George H.W. Bush, would begin work on Mexico.
It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind: peace and security, freedom, and the rule of law.
Just 2 years later, in December of 1992, Bush, Mexican President Carlos Salinas, and Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney officially signed the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement, otherwise known as NAFTA.
Calling it a defining moment, President Clinton, with great fanfare, signed legislation putting the North American Free Trade Agreement into law.
Then in 1993, President Bill Clinton, he signs on to NAFTA and then executes the agreement, creating the North American Development Bank and the Border Environment Cooperation Commission. Another year later, Miami, the Summit of the Americas, 1994. The U.S., Canada, and Mexico invite Chile and 33 more nations to join, expanding the pact to be called the Free Trade Area of the Americas, or the FTAA. Barriers to trade and investment are eliminated. Flash forward 6 years, the year 2000. While Americans are celebrating their independence, this July 4th would mark a new date in world history. The date Mexican President Vicente Fox proposes his 20 to 30-year timeline for the creation of a common North American market. Meanwhile, Ted Cruz is working for the Bush-Cheney presidential campaign as their domestic policy advisor. Cruz eventually assists Bush in winning the now infamous Florida recount, then accepting a position in the Bush administration Justice Department and Federal Trade Commission. Then, the following year, 2001, Dr. Robert Passer publishes his book, Towards a North American Community. In it, he openly calls for the creation of a North American Union, and in doing so, he earns the name, the founding father of the NAU. April 2001, President George W. Bush continues where his father and previous presidents left off and signs the Declaration of Quebec City, renewing the commitment to hemispheric integration. 5 months later, New Pearl Harbor would plunge the United States into a global war on terror.
By the way, my friends, this is a good chance for a segue. We're talking about Cruz and his connection to Bush. To whom else are the Bushes connected? Well, there's a lot of stir in the news in the last few weeks about the 28 pages, the 28 missing, banned, censored pages from the 9/11 report, which people seem to be saying, off the record of course, will implicate the Saudi Arabians in 9/11. Well, you know as well as I do that going all the way back to the first President Bush, H.W. Bush, he had very, very close ties, not just politically, but in business, with the Saudi Arabians. The first Bush president, who was in the CIA, who, by the way, I merely mentioned was in Dallas, Texas on the day that JFK was killed. He was the head of the CIA. He was into all kinds of dirty dealing. He was in bed with the Saudi Arabians. His son, who later became president, also in bed with the Saudis. You've seen the pictures of him walking, holding hands, literally. So if the Saudis are implicated in 9/11, what does that tell you about the Bushes? The Bushes, whose patriarch, Prescott Bush, financed the Third Reich, helped funnel weapons to Hitler. That Prescott Bush, the father of the first President Bush. So you got to wonder, with all the clout that the Bush family has in American politics, how they managed to get those 28 pages sealed for all these years? What will those pages tell us about Saudi Arabia? And what will that tell us about the Bush family, who in this day and age represented by Ted and Heidi Cruz? Do you see how everything is interconnected, interlaced? It's not an accident, my friends. These are people who make vast fortunes exactly by spending their time lacing together this weave of power and corruption. We'll take a break and we'll be back. All right, guys, I'm all done for the week. I will be back on, Monday. I'll be back with Monday. If you're celebrating Pesach, have a wonderful one. Have a deeply meaningful one. I hope you get together with family, friends, and really experience it the way it should be experienced. I will be back, as I said, on Monday. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.